Hey TSTL listeners. If you're looking for another unhinged romance novel podcast that's a bit more out there, and by out there I mean taking place on another planet, I have some great news for you. Claimed by TBD, the fictional podcast is coming with a second season, and all episodes are available for everyone. There is nothing to invest. Except maybe your sanity, because I'm pretty sure this fictional podcast that I write and perform makes absolutely no sense. Claimed by TBD is about a romance podcaster whose ultimate sexual fantasy has come true when she gets stranded on a planet full of hunky aliens. However, things turn into a total nightmare when she realizes that she has zero survival skills and only her amateur podcasting equipment. So she decides to do the only thing she can do: record a romance podcast documenting her miserable experience. So if you're a fan of alien abduction romance but are self-aware enough to know that you would never survive if you were actually in an alien abduction romance, or if you just love things that are a love letter for romance novel readers, this series is for you. You can visit claimedbytbd.substack.com, or you can find the link in today's show notes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a super special episode of Too Stupid to Live, a podcast about romance novels, usually $5 and under. I'm your host, Becky Feldman, and I am so excited to share that TSTL is hooking up with the Under the Covers book blog for a special podcast project called the Ripped and Ravished Book Club, which takes a deep dive into vintage bodice ripper romances and explores how they shaped the romance genre as we know it. So Francesca from Under the Covers is letting me share these tracks with you, the TSTL listeners, making this a true Rom-Pod crossover. I love the community Francesca created, so if you're interested in learning more about Under the Covers, be sure to check out the link in today's show notes. So the two of us will be discussing what many consider to be the book that essentially created what we know of as the modern romance genre, The Flame and the Flower. It was written by Kathleen E. Woodowitz. It was originally published in 1972, and that is the version we are reading. So yeah, my book smells weird and I love it. And its original price was $1.50. So how it works is Francesca and I are reading and then recording 2 chapters at a time. So if you are interested and are reading along or want to read along, let me just give you a few trigger warnings for the book. These are also topics that we discuss in this episode. There are depictions of abuse, assault, and the first physical encounter with the love interests is considered by many, including myself, to be rape. This first non-consensual encounter is one of the many reasons why this book continues to be so controversial despite its success. But regardless if this is a topic or a plot line that you're just not in a place to think about right now, I encourage you to put this episode aside. So as for a synopsis of what this book is about, but okay, just picture yourself in 1972. You're at the grocery store buying, Jell-O and cigarettes, or whatever you bought at the grocery store in the 1970s. You're in the checkout line and you see this book titled Flame and the Flower, and you pick it up and you read the back, and it says this: lovers for the ages. In an age of great turmoil, the breathtaking romance of Heather Simmons and Captain Brandon Birmingham spans oceans and continents. Their stormy saga reaches its limits of human passion as we follow Heather's tumultuous journey from poverty to her kidnapping at a squalid London dockside, to the splendor of Hearth Haven, the Carolina plantation, where Brandon finally probes the depths of Heather's full womanhood. Wow, pretty intriguing. And the question is, do you add this book to your cart? Well, you know what? We did. So please enjoy this discussion of chapters 1 and 2 of The Flame and the Flower.
I feel like the first thing that I was immediately I thought is Becky, what did we get ourselves into? Mm-hmm. I finished chapter 1 and I'm like, oh my God, what are we doing?
Yeah. I mean, we obviously were reading, oh God, I even forgot the Flame and the Flower, because I'm just like the Woodowitz one, because this is the first romance book and I've always heard about it. We all know it's this not an urban legend, but kind of. Yeah, I guess it kind of is.
So it's a mythical creature.
It really is. It's the Loch Ness Monster, if you will. But like everyone knows what the first chapter is about. We all knew going in. This is the Bible of romance novels, if you will, of modern romance novels. So we went in like, you know, when like you're going to get a cavity filled, like you know you're going to get a cavity filled and you like are prepared mentally. Like that's how I was doing it going in. I was like, it felt like I was like, honestly, like it felt like I was getting like an STD test or something of like, I know this is going to be uncomfortable for a second. I know what I'm getting into. Let me just
And you're worried about what's going to happen. Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
And I also have to add that yes, we were prepared, but at least for me, it still was shocking and hard, even knowing that was going to happen. So like,
right, yeah, because like
I was not prepared. I thought I was, but no,
we weren't. Because like honestly, I like think that like okay, we are readers, you know, and I think part of the reason why. I'm speaking for you, but I'll speak for me as well. That sentence, but the opposite. I think that like we are very like empathetic people. We empathize with our protagonists, and so this is the first time. While we've heard about this book anecdotally, this is the first time we are with our protagonists, and I think automatically as empathetic people, we are with her, and so now. Like nothing, you can hear about things day and night, but when you're walking in a character's shoes, like you are experiencing it for the first time, and that is what happened with us. That is, and now we need the support group.
We do need a support group. Oh my God, I felt like I finished, especially chapter 1 is where like you're thrown into this mess of everything that is the heroine's life, and I feel like for me, it started even before we get to what everybody knows about, which is obviously the rape, but it started before because she was being treated so horribly by her family, by her aunt, mainly aunt. I mean, the uncle was just there, but I feel like
either,
even but you know, the aunt was terrible.
Yeah, she
was. Yeah, she was already experiencing like the worst that could be, and I feel like one of the things that when she's given this opportunity to go to London, you're seeing her excitement and like. It's almost like you're getting that high before it, and you knew that was coming. You knew that the shoe was going to drop, and I was just waiting for it. It happened pretty fast, but the high of the heroine, and then to get that shock, because obviously she's very innocent. She has no idea about any of these things, and it's like that shock factor of her experiencing that and the disillusionment of. Yeah, you're not going to get that beautiful life that's been promised to you, and, you know, the job and the dowry and the possibility of marriage and whatever illusions she had, you know, made in her head. And that was also horrible, even just from, you know, that perspective. Forget, obviously, the physical horrible experience that she had, which, God, I mean, twice. And I say twice, counting wise was more, but it was definitely at least 2 people within 24 hours.
Yeah. And also it's not even she also murdered someone in between those two physical assaults, you know, and so
survival instincts kicked in. Good for her.
Yeah, and not that like I mean it was like obviously I feel like he got what he deserved in my opinion, but still it's still like a horrible thing. Like you're an adult for the first time, and like within 24 hours you kill someone, you know what I mean? And then it's like that's a lot there's a lot to take on. But like to your point, like I will say like I'm reading this. You know, kind of with the protagonist the first time, expecting like, I almost like it kind of reminded me of like a V.C. Andrews book in a way where like the character, it just like everything is so heightened and kind of a little campy with like the way the characters are, with their perspectives, you know, with the aunt, with her. I will say there was one moment when she was like, in the carriage with her uncle going out to London, and she saw him look at her a weird way, and she is taken aback by it. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, this is like, oh, okay, you're not as not dumb, but like you're not as innocent. You know something is off. Your
There
issue
was
is
a little
that
awareness.
yeah, she just doesn't know how to. She wasn't following her instincts versus oh, she is just like completely naive to the world. And that actually that was something that did surprise me about that chapter.
Yeah, I did notice that too. I feel like also she noticed a lot of times where her the uncle, the aunt's husband, he would sometimes look at her not in a sexual way, but like as in something he realizes something's going on, and she also noticed that. So she does have like the signs of having awareness, but I think obviously for the times it makes sense that she wouldn't feel like she has any way to act on any of that, also because she doesn't have her real her parents are dead, and she doesn't have the security and stability of what is basically at the time your dowry, your money, your position, and all of those things. So she kind of felt like she had to go along with it.
Totally. I mean,
that did come through, and it was sad to see.
Yeah, because like this woman has been failed again and again by the people who are supposed to protect her. Like she's never had anyone. Like even her father gambled away her, debts. Her mother passed away. Like I think that like this is someone, and I think that maybe that's why it felt a little VC Andrews-y, because like I think the characters in those books, again, they're being failed again and again by the people who are supposed to protect them, and it kind of like. In a V.C. Andrews book, it kind of like builds up the drama of it all, and like, kind of like victimizes these characters. And so that's kind of why my brain like went there of like, oh, this is like soapy, campy, very heightened,
Yeah. Yeah, and I can definitely see that once you make that comparison. Another thing that I wanted to make sure that I talk to you about is I've always heard about this book being like this sexual revolution, like all of this. And when it comes to the writing, I also feel like we didn't really get a ton of descriptive, as much as I was expecting, I guess, because of, we're used to reading a lot of that. And I feel like a lot of those, which is great. I didn't need the extra.
No.
That was my first gut reaction when we're going through some of those scenes. I was like, oh, thank God. We're just going to move on past it. I don't know if that changes later on in the book, but I will say that was something I noticed, that it wasn't super descriptive when it came to those scenes, and I was thankful for it. Even if it stays like that throughout the book, I am totally fine with that, but definitely it was good that it's not as much in those moments.
Yes, I will give the author credit for that, because like nothing about her rape is like sexualized. Like it is sexual violence, but it really does emphasize this is violence. This isn't anything that's supposed to be remotely titillating or passionate. So it really like, because it's interesting, because I'm kind of like, okay, you read this and it's like, at the time, like, what did people think of this violent act of rape? How was it? What's the context of it? Like, did people think it was, I don't know, like less serious than it was because it was sexual, and because it was with someone who was having sexual feelings because she's a human fucking being, like how, like this whole time I'm like, how does the author see this crime? Like I'm just like thinking that the whole chapter,
and the reader because it was so popular, and that's chapter 1, like that's how you open the book. So for it to become such a massive bestseller and birth the romance genre as we know it today, I feel like that is also important, because and I don't know if you read the article I had shared. I did, Jezebel, and I feel like one of the things that I did see in there is because obviously this is the forced seduction trope, which was very popular all throughout the 70s. In the 80s, the romance writers of America, there was even some kind of a walkout about wanting that to like go away. But it was prevalent in the 70s. And I feel like there was some nuggets that I found interesting that I've never thought of it this way, where forced seduction was kind of like giving permission to women who at the time there was still the idea that you need to be a good girl and you can't have sexual desires and all of this stuff. And by removing their choice, it gives them permission to enjoy the sexual desire, because it's not like their fault. They're not being the bad girl that wants to have sex, because obviously at the time that was not good, which I never
Right.
thought of it that way in the context of the times. I always would assume, and I mean, that's also growing up with a mom that was living at the times and would have not been okay with that. So I
Yeah.
think that it's a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around that, but I can also see how for some women that might have been the case. What do you
Totally. And
think?
like what you're describing, I think, is a very like common trope that people are into. Like I am in a bunch of different Facebook groups, and people do still love their kidnapping trope. They do request things that have dubious consent or non-consensual consent. So you know those, I think those feelings are there, but it's like really interesting because like I feel like we as readers came upon those kinds of tropes and those kinds of desires the long way. You know what not in the long way, but we were like, oh, okay, we get into romance, we discover that like there's all sorts of kinks and fascinations and desires and fetishes. One of them just happens to be this, where it is a kind of a fantasy of being, you know, forcefully seduced, and I think as a human being myself, I see the appeal of it in a consensual, sexy, you know, empowering way. But this what's so surprising is that this is the first. This is like you know,
the OG.
and there you don't have the context behind like you don't, there's no like research into the psychology of kink or like research into like, you know, consent, or not consent, but like, you know, kind of it was just like automatic of like, oh, all women want this, and not
Right.
it wasn't, oh, this is something that's a very like kind of niche fantasy that people are into. Like this was just like, oh, I think everyone's into it, and da 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 da. And so I think that's kind of what's interesting and weird. But yeah, and maybe kind of confusing, and maybe why those authors walked out in the 80s.
I think that it's also fascinating that as much as we see it now as this like niche thing, it was massively popular in best-selling and like literally made the career for so many of these big authors.
Right.
And they all used that. So the appeal was there and the liking was there. You know, I just find it fascinating that something like this would be sold at the grocery store at the time.
I know. It's so funny. Yeah, like but you know what's interesting is that like kind of like thinking about like other stories that were out at the time, other books, maybe even paperback books in other genres or movies. The plot line of this woman kind of getting taken in and forcefully seduced by a man, that subplot is still in a lot of other movies and books and things even now. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, like it kind of like reminded me, I was like, this plot line is something that we would still see in something like a Game of Thrones as a subplot
Oh, yeah.
line versus like this is just the main plot line because this is a romance, and we wouldn't think anything of it, you know, because we're just like, oh, it's brutal times, this is what the world is like, you know, like men were like this back then, and we would just move on. And so seeing it as like the A plot line, you know, I think is interesting. And so it is kind of like, it just kind of made me think of like, okay, we're looking at like other genres that do have a romantic subplot. Like, do we need to take into consideration consent and desire as much as romance writers do these days into other genres where there is a romance? I just feel like I spoke for like 20 minutes long.
No, but I think that makes total sense because I don't think we look at those things in any other genre. We are
Yeah.
only as, you know, hyper focused when it comes to romance. But like you said, Game of Thrones, nobody bats an eye at it.
Right,
So
right.
that is definitely something. Also, when I was reading this, because we'll get into the hero for a second, I don't know how we can redeem him because as much as I did not find the experience like it was not sexualized, I don't think, but also how can he come back from that?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I am really struggling. And then the thing is, as much as I'm struggling with that, I was trying to like be critical with myself, and because I do read dark romance and I love a good morally gray romantasy or paranormal or vampire, whatever hero. And I feel like there's a lot of those things in those kind of heroes that we do like, like we do like to have like that hero where he's horrible until he starts to care, and then he's no longer that, horrible person. So it like, how is this one so different that I am having that reaction where I'm like, oh no, I could never, he can never come back from that. So is it, I'm trying to question myself. We'll see how that develops throughout the book as well. But yeah, I'm like, I'm being more forgiving with like modern romance books for sure.
Oh, for sure. And I will say, like, things like I am having like lately, just with my like ADHD brain and just like understanding words and trying to read the room and understand society, I'm having such a hard time figuring out like what dark romance is, what cozy romance is, because with dark romance, which I love and I read, sometimes I'm like, oh, this was a dark romance, because as morally gray as some of the heroes in dark romances are, they still have a respect for agency. And yes. And so I feel safe reading it. Like, give me a Beauty and the Beast kidnapping retelling every day, and I'm like, yeah. This, he has zero respect for her agency, and for me, and words, that to me is way darker. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, we were more scared to read this than we were any current day mafia romance. Do you know what I mean?
Oh my God,
we were literally scared.
Yes. I mean, I am still scared to continue on.
Yes, yeah.
But in fact, I was like, I feel like he's the granddaddy of dark romance heroes, because like, I don't think you can get darker and more, I can't even say morally gray. That's like pitch black.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he commits a crime.
Zero remorse while committing that crime and being like, oh, I mean, I just want you to have an orgasm to like prove to himself that he was like good or whatever, because he got her to orgasm while he's raping her and she's saying she doesn't want it. Like,
yes.
Wild how
it's wildly misinformed, and like just about how what pleasure is and what violence is and what power is. Like, it's just a wildly, just grossly misinformed thing. What's funny is that I was telling you before we hit record that I listen to I always have like a book that I'm reading with my eyes and then an audiobook going while I'm like living, driving, cooking, whatever. The audiobook, I was like, I need a palate cleanse. The audiobook that I'm listening to, palate cleanse from this, is My Soul to Keep, where she is literally getting kidnapped by a demon who eats other human beings. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I just read this. I let me just have a nice, smooth, following this, a really sweet romance where a woman is kidnapped into hell or something. Do you know what I mean? Just I need something sweet. Oh, this one where she is kidnapped into someone who literally wants to kill her. Like, it is
totally fine.
Happening?
That is a great book. Highly recommend.
Love that book. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, it was just like one of those things that's been on my TBR list for like a gazillion years, and I was like, this is interesting.
Well, as much as like, there's kidnapping and all of these things, but at least with that hero you get, which is kind of like discussion with dark romance, it's a dark romance hero where you do feel safe. Because he's not the type of hero that's going to do any of these horrible things to the heroine. In fact, he's most of the time there to protect her. So like we talk about dark romance a lot of times, and we see some of these things, and some of it is because the heroine also wants those things to happen. There is kind of like an exchange of consent, even if sometimes it's not necessarily as explicit in dark romance, but the understanding, I feel like it's enough there where you never feel like the heroine is not in it,
Right, yeah. Because like when I think of dark romance, and I could be completely wrong, and there are people who probably know better than me, I think of, in a dark romance, for me, it's usually about things that would typically terrify a person is actually something that turns our protagonist on. Like, it's something that our our protagonist yearns for. And so sometimes like when I see things that I'm like, well, this isn't like if it's like a mafia romance, but the sex is pretty vanilla, like I'm kind of like, this really isn't dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and not that is just my opinion. And I, I'm not here to tell publishers how to categorize things, but like, I'm just like, oh, this is dark because like, these are just like two serial killers, but like their sex is like kind of normal. And so like, I don't really like, I see it as a dark comedy, but I don't see it as a dark romance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or something like that. You know what I mean? And with this, I'm just like, this is just dark and not romantic.
This is super dark. I really don't know how he can come back from here. I mean, we will see. Maybe I'm going to be surprised. I do love character growth, so
sure.
He can only go up from here.
Yeah, I mean, we only read chapters 1 and 2 so far. And I will say, in chapter 1, I was curious, like, was there a level of redemption? Because this is another thing I was surprised by. When I heard about this book and people would be like, oh, in the Flame of the Flower, he rapes her in chapter 1. The context of what happens is she murders her uncle and she like runs off to like the wharf or the docks or, wherever. And she is mistaken for a prostitute where the Captain Brandon's like underlings or whatever, he's like, men, find me my prostitute or whatever. That again, this was just part of the times. So he mistakenly the first time thinks she has been hired to be here. And so there was an attempt. I'm so curious if that was like the author's attempt to be like, he didn't know. But
probably, but the second time he knew.
The second time he 100% knew, and it's like then you just made him even worse. I mean, what he did was a crime. There is no mistaking what he did was a crime. The crime also came with he also misunderstood the context and committed a crime. It wasn't he misunderstood the context. Period. He is a criminal man. He's a villain.
Exactly. And I feel like also another thing that I found interesting was the author put in that she also misunderstood why she was being taken there, because she assumed that she was caught for what she had just done. Exactly. And somehow this was like, she was being taken off for punishment. And I also found that was interesting because I feel like that didn't necessarily add anything to that scene. Like she could have just been checked out because of all the trauma she just went through, which is totally understandable. Like you didn't have to like put this image of her thinking that that's why she was more complacent and going along with it, more docile, I guess, the first time that it happened. Because I feel like it would have been understandable enough after what she had just gone through.
Exactly, yeah.
She wouldn't have had the mental capacity, because like it just also happened in such fast progression that I don't think that was necessary, and it just made it seem like another thing that she was trying to justify why they found themselves in this situation, which
it was like an identity. It was like, let's take a false identity romance or a mistaken identity romance and make it the least fun. You know what I mean? And like just take all the fun of the trope out of it. And so that's what makes me so curious about like, oh, what was the context at the time? Like when people were reading this for the first time in 1972, like I guess I just wish I could time travel.
Yes,
that's my point. And just like see what people think of like, oh, this is like, how much did it affect them with what little we knew or realized then that we do now?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is the most fascinating thing of reading these kind of stories, is the fact that how were they justified or received, or I don't know, I guess not explained away, but kind of.
Yeah.
Or enjoyed. I mean, obviously they were enjoyed, because for them to be so massively successful, they were enjoyed. So
yeah, and it still is like, I'll get recommendations every now and then for these like kind of kidnapping romance, kidnapping erotica is still very prevalent,
very popular.
And
especially in alien romance.
Especially, I mean, like, how can you? I mean, you need an alien to it's not kidnapping if there's no aliens, but that's just my again of an opinion. But you know what's interesting is that he in chapter 2 he makes his reappearance. She discovers that she's pregnant with his child. They have to find him and force him to marry her. The marriage doesn't happen in chapter 2, but they try. I'm like, there's an attempt at redemption, and it's a failed attempt for me.
Failed completely. At least up to chapter 2 was complete.
Yeah, like
failure.
no one's whatever, and where the aunt rips at Heather's dress, and then you see like Captain Brandon come in and be like, "Don't do that," and he like puts a cloak around her to cover her up, and you're kind of left thinking like, but wait a minute, like he was, and they use the term, he was such a cad, and now he's saving her by putting a cloak around her, and I'm like, first of all, what do you think a cad is? Like when I think cad, I think of like, you know, like I think of guys in like the 1950s who drove Corvettes, and when they would get in and out of the car, they wouldn't open the door. They would just hop over the door. Like those are cads. Right. This guy is not a cad. He is a criminal.
Yeah, and even so like he does the cloak thing, which, listen, bare minimum. Yeah. But then on the same breath, like, which is why it's like, no, the marriage is still not happening, because he's not even offering marriage. He's recognizing that is his child, and he's like, I'm gonna set her up with a house. And basically he's going back to what he was kind of offering her at the beginning, you know, when they were together, which is, you're gonna be set up for me for whenever I come here, you will serve me, basically. And in a way, that's what he's reverting back to. Even though there's a child now, it's like, I'm going to set her up, I'm going to give her a house and some servants, and she'll be fine, and I'm going to stop by whenever I feel like whenever it's convenient for my schedule and I happen to be in the area.
Yeah, and like that to me is like so interesting, because I'm like, oh, what like I would love to know what it would be like for like my brain goes to like a different story for some reason of like, what is it like to grow up really rich, but you're during this time you live with just your mother, and then you have this like rich man coming in every now and then who you're supposed to call dad. Like I would love, like, to me that makes for such a more interesting, like, because it doesn't involve violence, you know, and maybe that's why I'm like, I want to read that like family drama. But you know, like what's interesting is like going back to like sometimes like when you see this kind of action in a trope that isn't romance, again, where this kind of romantic plotline is a subplot, and you see the male character like put the cloak around the woman and protect her, and we're supposed to think this guy is a hero. You know what I mean? And I always have I had this joke with my friend, and this is a dark joke, but like whenever like we would watch movies and like a guy likes a girl and she falls asleep, and he puts the blanket on her as she's sleeping, and it's like we're supposed to think this guy is great, and it's like, oh, like what is she supposed to like say, thank you for not raping me? Like, do you know what I mean? Basically. Like you just did the bare minimum. and
we
like,
can't even thank him for that, because he did that already.
Exactly, he already did it, you know? And so it's like, oh, thank you for not raping me this time
again,
when I'm completely naked in front of you. You're such a hero. Like in these kinds of like stories, we're seeing like these men kind of rewarded for just like basic decency. It's like, oh, you didn't rape someone, where's your Nobel Peace Prize? You know what I mean? Like what? Basically. Like we are giving people such a pass, and we still kind of are sometimes. You know.
We are, and I actually feel like thinking back, and this is just me theorizing, but I think thinking back of the times, that is probably what was working. You know, that's probably what was making him redeemable when somebody was reading it at the time. It's like, oh, but look, he did this. Oh, but look, he did that. And also something that I found interesting while reading up on all of this and like the times and all of that, it's also giving women who at the time were experiencing some of those things at home, you know, like in their real life, there was a lot more violence, not necessarily in, you know, like someone beating them, but some of these things were prevalent, and that was the way that men were treating them. And in a way, maybe reading a book like this, it's showing that, yeah, at the beginning you're going through this horrible thing, but maybe towards the end there's going to be that happy ending. And maybe that was the hope and the excitement for reading these kind of stories, because it reflected the violence they were experiencing, and they were recognizing those little things that they themselves saw as like, oh, well, but he did that, or like, you know, those little things that were giving them hope. And at the end of the story, that book was giving them but there is a happy ending at the end of that. And that was kind of like the hope for their own life, that maybe
like it allows them to kind of like rewrite the narrative of their current. Like, you know what's interesting? Like, when bully romance first came about, I was like, this is traumatizing. I don't know if I'm going to read it. But then I went on this deep dive on Reddit, and I'm like, why do people like this? Like, and then I realized, like, oh, bully romance allows people who were bullied to kind of rewrite the narrative, like something. Especially with like a Penelope Douglas when you're younger, like it's a story about. I mean, most of her books, I could be wrong, are like they're rather younger women who are going through kind of a bullying situation. It turns out fine in the end, and so when I finally read, was it like Punk 57? I was like so nervous, but then I was like, oh, I loved this. Because again, it allows you to kind of like rewrite a narrative that happened to you, and it's like, oh, now I see it, and I'm like curious if maybe that's kind of the same thing, where, you know, this is, you know, people are feeling like they're Heather, and kind of see her get her happily ever after, and it kind of there maybe is something healing to their own life, like
Yeah, I think that for sure there's probably merit to that. I know that there's a lot of people that feel like that reading dark romance in general. Like,
for
even
sure,
reading those horrible experiences that do happen in some of the dark romances, and sometimes they're not necessarily by the main character, but they are going through some stuff, and it is healing for them. So I think that is still validating, and I think that is important. So obviously not everything is for everybody, but I think we can all also approach these kind of stories with some empathy, and right now all the empathy for Heather, because oh my god,
and you know what else is interesting is that now we're constantly getting, not constantly, but I can't open up a book anymore without seeing like, here's the content in this book,
right?
And to not have that here, you know, like there's no content warning, you know. I think that's also, I'm like curious if that kind of like added to the alarm of it all, you know, of just like, even though like there's something different from having an author give you a content warning versus having someone who, oh, I read this, by the way, rape is in it. You know what I mean? Like, there's something like when an author gives you a content warning, there's a level of like trust. There's a contract, you know, with the reader of like, just so you know, this is in here, blah, 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 versus like, oh, I'm going to write a book. Hopefully it gets published. It is blah, blah, blah. I read this years ago. And then like someone who is like teaching you about romance is telling you, oh, this book actually had rape in it, you know? And it's like, that's different. That's way different than the author acknowledging kind of the actions of the characters.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we'll never really truly know what was the understanding of the time for that. But I did read a little bit up on Kathleen E. Woodiwiz, and she just sounded like this sweet little lady, you know, at home, like it just like the most. Yeah, I mean, like the things that she was writing it's fascinating to me how, you know, something so dark can come from something so normal. Like her life was just very normal.
Totally. And I also like think that like what's like it's almost like it's fascinating that this book does exist versus like it's more fascinating about the existence of the book than the story of the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of just like reading the article that you sent, like how it came about, how it was kind of like suddenly like this book just landed on a publisher's desk, and then all of a sudden like other random, you know, manuscripts were landing on publishers' desks that were very similar in the depiction of women's sexuality, and how like how it was like people were yearning for this and almost like simultaneously and not even knowing, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's like kind of like the connection there. And the fact that this book did so well being only a paperback book and kind of showing that like, oh, these are what like it kind of just showing that like readers aren't who we think they are, and books don't have to be these like academic things, you know what I mean? And just like seeing the kind of the how much people yearn for popular fiction that you can get at the grocery store. Like it is monumental in that way.
It is. I mean, from the distribution to how it opened up the view of women and what they wanted to consume, because obviously this was mainly women writing it, consuming it, reading it. And I also feel like it's probably it coincided very well why all those manuscripts were coming at the same time with, you know, feminism, women liberation in the 70s. And that was what they were feeling, what they wanted. And that's how they were expressing it, because sexuality was a big part of that as well.
Yeah, because like I could be wrong, but I think I forget when the ERA kind of votes was happening. I guess it was like 1969 or something, or around then, you know, where like our politics, you have like kind of these like movements, and at the same time you also have like, you know, this book coming out. And I think that's still very much the case. Like, you know, when I ask guests to be on my show and they're not romance readers, there are times where, you know, I will say like, is there something you're interested in? And they're like, as long as it's feminist. And like, that's because that's their understanding of like, oh, if it's a romance, if it's about like a woman finding a man, if it's this heteronormative thing, then it's not feminist. And so like, it is interesting because I feel like romance is the most feminist genre there is, you know?
In general, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember, I feel like I might even like, because we're all in a group chat, and I was like, okay, what's a like, if someone's like romance isn't feminist, what's the first book you recommend? And I'm like, because like, for me, it's all of them, you know, but.
It is. Like, I would struggle with that because inherently the genre as a whole is feminist. Like, that's what it's all about, because even something like this, which obviously if somebody picks this up right now, they're going to say this is not feminist at all.
Right. Yeah.
But at the time it was, because it was all about that, you know, sexual liberation and all of these things. I'm sure we'll get more into that as the book goes on. But just from what I know of the book, these were not things that were even considered to be put on print or even talked about. And the fact that they were being talked about, maybe we don't think right now that it's enough, or it might be problematic how they're being talked about, but that was how they were starting to talk about it, which is still feminist.
Absolutely. And you know what? It kind of just like, and not to bring in heated rivalry into the conversation, I have a real
We always
problem.
need to bring heated rivalry
I know. I have like a real problem, but like, you know, people are like, why are so many women into heated rivalry? And because it came from a genre that came from women. Like what? Like why are people like? I feel like there's I don't know. I love my male friends who don't read romance. They're great. We love them. But they're like trying to put puzzle pieces together that I'm like, the pieces are together, man. Like it came from a genre that historically catered to women. It doesn't have to cater to women anymore. It doesn't cater to women anymore. It just caters to people who like the genre. So anyone can read romance, but you know, looking at the numbers, more women are reading these books than men. You know, we love these stories. Rachel Reed's such a good writer. It's kind of this lightning, you know, kind of like lightning caught in a bottle kind of moment. But it's like, it shouldn't be like, it's funny to me that people are surprised. I'm just sitting there laughing at people, and the end.
I think a big part of the why, this is just my opinion, I think that they are surprised because they feel like women read romance to self-insert all the time, and they feel like, well, how are you going to self-insert when there's two men? I don't personally read like that, so I can understand their argument, but I kind of feel like that's where they're coming from, because if that's how they see women reading romance, it's the fact that they're doing it so they can see themselves having these experiences that they normally don't have. And maybe this is coming from how men consume porn. They see themselves as that, and that is probably how they think of women consuming romance novels. And that's why they can't make the connection.
Yeah,
because we should be consuming these books as they consume their videos.
Exactly. Yeah, which is why there's like it's so interesting because like I feel like I've tried so hard to in my life to kind of like defend my romance reading by making like a 1-to-1 of like, well, it's like when guys like this or when girls like this. But the truth is, there are books that I've read to self-insert. There are books I've read to escape. There are books I've read to personally, I love the structure of a romance. Like I read it for the plot structure, mostly. And but you know, like every book is different, and every book kind of makes you feel different things. And sometimes you're reading a book for the structure, and then you realize, oh, this is hot. I'm gonna bank this for a fantasy later on when I'm alone. Or you're like, oh, this made me cry. Like, or oh, I really loved being in this world. You know, like these are books, and it's not just versus porn where like, you know, we know what it's for. But then again, there are films being made that do cross the line between like erotic and taboo and things like that I think that's where these books lie sometimes. They can lie. Depends on the reader. But yeah, like I just think that like we're all like, so my thing is when I try to explain it, I feel like I equate reading a romance novel to like men watching sports. You know, like
that's a good analogy.
Yeah, because like for me, again, I like structure. Like sports are all about structure. Like a romance novel there's going to be a beginning, middle, and a happy ending. You know, the characters are going to learn, they're going to grow. You have your tropes. In sports, the tropes are just what sport it is. Like you're gonna use hockey sticks when you watch hockey, like they're gonna in baseball they're gonna try and hit the ball with the bat. Like that's the same thing as a trope, and like so. But that doesn't mean that going to a game or watching a game or whatever you're going to watch isn't the most exciting thing in the world. Because in 2 weeks from now, when it's the Super Bowl, you're all going to act like idiots watching your favorite game. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be tweeting about, like it's the same thing. You know, like that's what picking up for me. What picking up a romance novel is I know what's going to I know the structure of it all because I love the genre, I love the trope, but I don't know how it's going to happen, and I am so excited to find out.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect analogy. Like even going back to the sports, like, and I'm not good with sports terms.
Me
but
neither.
Like,
I don't
say there's some kind of like a triple something. I know there is something like that in hockey. Those kind of like known plays, like the hitting a home run. You may not get a home run in every game, but you know when you do, that is a trope. Like that game had a home run.
Those are tropes, and it's like and. You know, we don't know how, like, in a sports game, I again, the teams are either the team you want is gonna win, it's gonna lose, it's gonna tie, and go into more games. That's how it's gonna end. No one's gonna suddenly start playing the cello, you know, on the field. Like that's nuts. And like so that's when people are like, well, romance is so like, you know, like predictable. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like it's a genre. It's a publishing, it's a form of storytelling. Like that's like, you know, saying like, oh, it's like someone buying a book of poetry and then suddenly they're reading like someone's memoir or a nonfiction kind of biography or something. Like that's not, it's in the wrong section. These are just sections of a bookstore.
Exactly. I mean, the same thing can be said for thrillers. Like, oh, that is so predictable. Like somebody dies or there's a bad guy that's chasing you and what's going to happen. And then usually you find out who that person is. You find out who's the main bad guy at the end. Or in horror, like all genres have structure.
Totally.
Just because they follow the structure, and they all have tropes, like, you know, unreliable narrators and all of these things. Like all genres have that. And I really dislike how romance is the only one that gets that bad rep. You know, for like, oh, well, you already know what's going to happen. Well, so then why are you reading a mystery? You already know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to die. And then by the end, you will find out who that is.
Right. Exactly.
And usually the protagonist still makes it out alive.
Yeah. It's like, they're kind of the same thing. Like, it's funny when it's like, oh, you always know what's going to happen. And then they pick up a Bosch novel. You know what I mean? And then I'm just like, okay, come on now. Like,
or even back to the sports analogy. So why are you watching a game? You know somebody's going to win.
Exactly.
And that's how it's going to end.
I know. And it's also like, and you also won't shut up about this one home run that happened in like 1976. Yes. So there's a reason why, like these things are sticking with you. These things are, come on, But again, that's just like my own thing that I need to get off my chest. Yes. Yeah.
But I also wanted to talk about tropes, actually, because I don't think we got to see that yet. And it'll be interesting, maybe something to look for in the next chapters. This is supposed to be like kind of the birth of romance tropes, in some ways. And obviously we didn't see that yet, except for seduction, which, I mean...
I just saw the forced part.
I'm glad that has been relegated to, a very niche subcategory at the moment. But I am excited to see how, to identify some of those modern structures of tropes and see how that is presented here. I did find a little bit of a hard time with the point of view switching, because she did do that a little bit, and I was a little thrown off by that. And I don't know if that was just how the books of the time were, or if this was a stylistic choice by Kathleen E. Woodowitz. So that part would be interesting to read another author and see if it was just how things were of the time.
Do you want to hear something funny? And I am not going to say what book this is or anything like that, or the author's name. I did... I bought, obviously my show is $5 and under, so I'm always buying cheap and free books. I think I did get duped by downloading a book that was written by AI, under, and I had done a little bit of that AI training for extra money, and just knowing what comes out of the output. I just knew it was AI. And what's so funny is that when you're putting in a prompt of write a romance novel with X, Y, or write a book about this, and that, AI is going to generate it. And that AI book actually did change perspectives very drastically, because again, it's a computer or whatever, and it's just kind of generating what it thinks books are. And so I was
especially if it was trained with old books that are already probably in the public domain. I don't know if they are, but
who knows? But exactly. And so it was just really funny, because I'm I was so I feel duped by reading the AI book, and I felt kind of a chump a little bit. Come on, guys. But I was well, at least
that's probably going to happen to all of us.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But I was oh, okay, at least maybe it got my brain kind of in the thing of okay, the perspective has changed now. You know what I mean? It kind of it warmed me up a little bit. But yeah, what a bad way to be warmed up.
No, it's horrible. Yeah, but I did struggle a little bit with that, because I'm oh, wait a second, let me reread that first paragraph, because I'm where are we and who's talking right now?
Yeah, because there's even perspectives from characters who are side characters, and that's what's so that to me is crazy. And that was also in the AI book, and you're this isn't, what are we reading? But then I realized, oh, okay, now it's all kind of, I'm glad I'm reading this now, and understanding what's happening, and
maybe
but it
they
is
specifically ask, can you write this book in the style of Kathleen E. Woodowitz?
I would not be surprised. Or if they're if they tell the chat GPT or whatever they're using to write a romance, the computer is programmed to the computer has the knowledge, oh, this was the first major romance novel written, it was the most popular, we're gonna output it in that way just because the data shows this was popular, and so it's weird. I mean, it's a weird time to be reading this, and it's a weird time to be writing.
yeah I mean, on all counts. I think it is a weird time to be reading a book like this anyway, at least for the first time.
Yes.
I kind of wish that I would have read it earlier, but at the same time, I'm glad that I didn't, and I am able to consume this with my brain today at the same time. Because I feel like maybe 10 years ago, I would have felt different about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't have noticed, or, you know, I might have done the same thing, like, oh, well, look, he came over with the cloak, and there's some redeeming qualities there, maybe. Where I'm right now, I'm like, no.
Yeah. Like I'm glad I'm reading it now, just after, like, when I first heard about this book, it was like when I first started doing my podcast, and like, not that I wasn't a seasoned romance reader at the time, but I've learned so much about the genre since doing the podcast. And so reading it now, after like everything, like after all of the people that I've met and everything that I've learned, you know, it is fun to kind of, I'm glad I'm picking it up now with like kind of the context that I have, you know, and learning about like sexuality and like what people find titillating is understanding consent more. Like, I feel like consent is something that, like, I feel like, you know, I feel like we know what consent is, but it's constantly like we still need to look at it and evolve and analyze it and see what it means, you know, like. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just me growing up and becoming an adult, which is,
Well, yeah, and I also think that at least young women now have a bit of an advantage to, at least where we were, you know, at their age, because things were not as analyzed before, you know,
right,
so that
totally,
we didn't have the context, and nobody anywhere was there to like say, hey, have you looked at it this way? And maybe this isn't good. And at least now those kind of discussions are available, so they can make better and informed decisions.
Totally. And I think something to think about is, like, you know, people, like, a lot of romance readers, like, discovered romance by, like, cleaning out a parent's attic and finding this book. And
can you imagine as a 12-year-old?
I mean, I'm sure so many 12-year-olds read it and they're like, oh, this is what romance is. And I certainly, and we look back at like kind of like the messages that we got when we were younger. And I mean, obviously I didn't pick up this very specific book and read it and think this is what romance is, but there are like other like movies from the 80s or, you know, books, novels that kind of romanticized non-consent, and I kind of grew up with, it's like this weird kind of like birthmark in your thought process and your libido of what you think love is, and that's why, I don't know, you fuck up all your relationships. I don't know, but that's my point is.
I totally see that. It's like everything's going through that filter and that lens.
Yeah. Like I used to think like like people like you, like it was okay to fall in love if you were a witch and you cursed someone to love you. And I thought, like, that's okay. That's how true love can happen. And then you realize, oh, like, I was watching this movie where that was the plot line. And then I was like, and I loved this movie growing up. And then I was watching it again, like a few weeks ago, like as an adult for the first time. And I'm like, whoa, this is what I can see why I took a wrong turn.
Like, if that is okay. Because again, it can go both ways.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just like these like weird messages. I don't know. It's like, even like how a lot of us were like attracted to the Beast when in Beauty and the Beast, and now we're all into monster romance now, you know?
Yeah.
Or
it left a mark. It definitely
did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like it's funny, like I was talking about this with a guy who like watched a lot of cartoons growing up, and he was talking about like his crush on a cartoon female animal that he had growing up that still kind of like, obviously he didn't marry a human chicken or anything, but like, you know what I mean? But like he just like still is
That'd
like,
be hard to do.
It'd be very hard to do, but he's still like kind of like, when he thinks of that character, will think of like, oh, when I was a kid, I blah blah blah, like I thought she was so sexy and da da da, and it's like, oh, I think that when I think of the Beast now, like it's like you go back to the kid, if he's so protective and can kill you, but he won't, and like.
Well, and if you think about it, a lot of those cartoons with animals or whatever monsters, obviously not necessarily the Beast, but you know, some other cartoons, they were sexualized in a lot of like how they were drawn and etc. Like the outfits, like some of these things, I'm like, that is probably not good for children, but
no, yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are, and it's like gonna happen, and like, you know, we could even been watching this before we were old, and like kids are gonna see something they're not supposed to see. It's like part of childhood, and it's gonna make a mark and whatever. But like, I always think about like what the meeting was like when they were designing Jessica Rabbit, of just like, was it just like a bunch of men in a room being like, here's like giving feedback on like different designs of her, and it's like, it icks me out so much.
Yeah. Now just that picture, I can see it, like the whole boardroom, like, oh oh no,
yeah.
We did not need that visual.
No.
But yeah, so I think it'll be interesting going forward, but in and of itself, I think it's fascinating, the legacy of the book, just because, yes, it is groundbreaking, and the doors that open for a lot of women is amazing. Somehow I can't wrap my brain around that yet. Maybe that will change. I don't know. Or maybe we do need the context of, you know, somebody that lived it to tell us, like, this is why, and please explain to me how that is. But I think that, you know, for the genre, this was foundational.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, like, overall, like, I was invested, you know, like, I was horrified, but I was invested. And, like, it's not written in a boring way, you know, like, I am definitely, like, I think the prose is very good, you know, like, and I think, like, I'm curious, like, this isn't a DNF for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be, I mean, obviously it's not because we committed to this, but like, I think like in terms of my curiosity of how like the story will end, I am invested and I'm going to finish it.
I am invested too. Yeah, for sure. It's like I just want to see something good happen for Heather, because my God, she
deserves it.
She needs a win right now. Please somewhere.
Yeah.
Soon.
And I am just curious how this guy is going to come around. I will never like him. There's nothing he can do will ever make me like him, but I am curious as to like what's his arc gonna be, you know. So yeah,
that will be definitely interesting, because I don't see it.
No, he's terrible. He's not a good guy.
I mean, chapter 1 was horrible for him, and then chapter 2 was not any better.
Yeah,
it was not any better. Like, he didn't like face the situation and be like, okay, listen, I thought about what I did, and I see that this is wrong, and here's how I'm going to rectify the situation and then move on from there. No. No, he is still trash.
He's engaged to someone else.
Yeah,
he's engaged to someone else at this point. Like, everything about him, he's like so trash. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know that he's going to come out of the trash, but I'm open. I am definitely invested. I am definitely excited to keep reading. So we've got our next 2 chapters to digest.
Exactly. I love that we're doing this. Like, I kind of I loved being in school, and so it feels like I'm like back in English. Like, read 2 chapters and then write your essay. You know, so I'm very like, I'm like, this is thrilling.
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought, okay, well, it'll just be a 1 episode discussion, which is what I've done on the podcast. You do on the podcast. But then I was like, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to discuss and like dive into, whereas it's going to end up being like a really long and then not in-depth enough discussion.
Yes.
So this works out okay, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Because like there'll be times where like I'll do an episode and I'm like, or an episode on a book, and like I feel like we barely scratch the surface, and then it's like, well, time's up, you know. And then there's other ones where it's like, okay. So yeah, this is definitely one to really dig into.
Yeah, because there's so much. I mean, there's the value of the book for, you know, the context of the genre, for the context of tropes and modern romance, and all of the mess of the actual book, and, you know, ramifications with where the culture was and women's lives. And I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack. So I'm excited to continue unpacking.
Me too.
For
I feel like we're scholars. I feel like we're so
right?
smart. Are we like historians or something? Like, I feel like we should get our doctorates after this.
Doctorate in romance history.
Yes, please. Yes.
But yeah, and I definitely think that in the next 2 chapters, I would like to see some happier discussions.
Yes. Yeah.
So hopefully we'll come back with a lighter note.
Totally. I think in the next 2 chapters we're finally going to be reading a romance.
I hope.
Fingers crossed.
Oh my God. Even if it starts off with him being horrible while like they're married, like I can totally deal with that. Like that is, I'm used to that. You know, I can even deal with the forced marriage because there's plenty of that in romance right now. So I'll deal with that. I can manage, but
yes, it's just like being a criminal.
Yeah.
That's
which he will still be.
He will always be. He will always be. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, thank you, Becky. This was so much fun.
This is
and
so much fun.
I can't wait to do this again.
Me too. Yes, I'm so excited. This is like really jazzing me up. And I'm like, oh, like I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm looking forward to reading The Flame and the Flower, if you can believe it.
Right? I know. I feel the same way. It's like, I'm excited to pick up the next 2 chapters.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Too Stupid to Live. I hope you have a historically significant rest of your day. 'Cause I just can't make my eyes behave. For links to the book that we reviewed today, be sure to check out the show notes or visit the episode page at tstlpodcast.com. Too Stupid to Live participates in affiliate marketing programs, including Amazon Associates. The podcast may collect a small commission if consumers purchase items by clicking on certain links shared on the show notes, episode page, and other social networking platforms. This is at no cost to the consumer, and all commissions go to supporting TSTL.